again, I kind of want to make this a discussion just by asking you guys maybe about some myths that you may have heard about homeless people, and you may be able to tie that into individual things. There are reasons. Some of the myths, I'm not going to say they're not true, but there are reasons that they are true.
Common when I was growing up, my grandparents would say, only people that are homeless are people that choose to be homeless.
Yeah.
It's all voluntary.
Slackers.
People still say that.
There's no more work.
I grew up on and off homeless until I was a young adult.
Did you?
In the system, I grew up in boys' homes, orphanages, stuff like that. And when I would get out, I'd be on the streets until, and then that spilled over into my early adulthood.
Yeah. If you want to throw something in at any time, please do, because I can tell you what I have learned from talking to people and what I've learned in school. But seriously, if you have anything, or if I'm saying something that doesn't seem correct.
No, I mean, the biggest thing I would just remember by is like, I didn't care about having a place to sleep, a place to be when I was awake. You know, like where you're supposed to, if you have nowhere to go and nowhere, nothing to fall back on at all, what are you supposed to do? Anybody who wants to talk about homeless people, like, say, oh, they just like need this or they need to work or they need that, I don't think any of them would know what to do if they had nowhere to go.
Exactly. That's a very, very good point. One of the big misconceptions about people choosing to be homeless, in my experience, I did work with a homeless population briefly in southern Indiana, in a rural area, which rural homelessness is a lot different than urban homelessness, so it's been kind of a culture shock here. But as far as the choosing to be homeless, again, there are some people that may say that they choose to be homeless, and I can't say that nobody who's homeless chooses that way, but in my experience, people who have said that are so mentally ill that they couldn't make it out. I have one particular client that lived under a bridge that we would go and see, and he was the greatest guy ever. He had built kind of like his own little house out of cardboard under the bridge. He had a kerosene heater, which kind of made him nervous, but he was able to survive. There was a horrible ice storm several years, or 2 years ago, and he was able to survive it. But anyways, he, one of the things I always tell people about him, when I first met him, he told me he had been in 4 wars, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War, and Star Wars. And yeah, he's awesome. He's like the greatest person ever. For him, for his case, he was just so mentally ill. Like, he wouldn't have made it in housing. He didn't trust anybody. He was schizophrenic. There's no way he would have made it. So, while on the outside, that may be, people may say they choose to be homeless. Again, there are reasons why people choose that. I truly believe, and this is just me, and people may think different, but I truly believe if people are given the opportunity to work and to have a home, they will take it. So that's just sort of my thing. Yeah, good. But also, like, in this particular case, like, I know we have a lot of overlap, like, between illness and homelessness. Like, you could have folks who would probably do all right in housing if they were medicated enough to be normal. But when you medicate someone that much, how much is like their personality, and that kind of thing. And so what sorts of value judgments are we making as a society when we say, well, this person will be just fine if we medicate the shit out of them and stick them in an apartment? Nobody wants to be like that. I worked in Philly briefly one summer in college, and I was working with the Center for Assisted Living, and one of the things that they do is they take folks out from nursing homes and they put them back in the community, like in housing and this sort of thing. There was this one guy that we were working with, and he had a physical disability, whole child diagnosis, and he said, okay, we said, Rodney, when we get you out of the nursing home, where do you want to go? And he said, I don't want to go to no apartment. And we said, why? And he said, well, if I go to an apartment, they're going to make me take medication. He said, and they made me take medication here, and I did not want to take medication here. And he associated, for him, medication was as bad as the nursing home. And so he lived essentially under and that's he's thriving, but he's thriving more than he would be in an apartment.
Well,
You know?
it becomes what you know. Whatever you do in your life, whether homeless or anything else, going to prison, any of that. After a while, that's what you know. It's not going to be as big of a shock after you've been doing it a while. You know.
Exactly.
Doing something different will become a shock.
Yes, exactly. No, that's a very good point, and that's one of the things that I have found out is that people get accustomed. I'm just going to sit this down so that we're going to have a better discussion than anything I prepared. I think that, you know, one of the reasons people stay homeless is that when you're used to living a certain way, it's difficult when you have to change. For example, the example I thought of today when I was preparing this, 3 days ago when I was preparing this, because I was going to prepare this at the last minute, was that, you know, like, I haven't ridden a bike since I was 13 years old. Now, I know they say, you know, the expression is just like riding a bike, you never forget, blah, blah, blah. That is not true. If I got on a bike today, I would fall about my ass. And if you haven't lived in an apartment or in a house, you know, one of the things, the program that I worked for was a supportive housing program, which are wonderful programs, because I think one of the misconceptions that I hear a lot is oh, if we just give them housing, they're going to be okay. Some people will. Some people, their only issue was they, you know, lost a job or their homes were foreclosed on. If they can just afford housing, they'll be okay. But there's a whole other group of people who are severely mentally ill and can't afford health care. There are people who are physically ill and can't afford physical health care. There are people who are alcoholics, addicts. Housing them is not going to solve that problem. So there's actually kind of a new model. I don't know how new, but it's fairly new. There's what they call supportive housing, which is pretty much what it sounds like. They provide the house, the agency provide the housing, and then they have a case manager going in, working with them, but to help them with that adjustment, because that is a really hard adjustment to make. So, I mean, think about it. If you had to go from being housed to living on the street all of a sudden, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know how to survive. So it's just, you know, something to definitely remember that, you know, just giving them a house, they're not necessarily going to thrive.
I think also, like, I live in supportive housing as well. I have my supportive housing. I think the best sort of supportive housing that you have is something where no aspect of the supportive housing is forced upon you, but where you say, you know, here are the support services that we have, here is what we can offer you.
Treat you like a person so you can decide.
You know, pick what you need, and we'll do that. Like, it's really unfortunate. I know, like, at the city level, a lot of us have been fighting. The city wants to build all of this supportive housing for mentally ill drug addicts or whatever. And it ends up, like, the housing that they were proposing was, you know, you have mandatory services and blah, blah, blah. And there are a whole lot of homeless folks that came out and said, I don't want to live in a house if there's mandatory services. You know, I might need support services. I don't want to live in a house with mandatory services. There are a whole bunch of people with disabilities who would have qualified for that housing that says, I don't want to live there if I have to take these services. You know, and so, you know, I can be a little bit critical of supportive housing.
No, that's, I mean, you have experienced it firsthand. Like, I love it.
And I live in awesome supportive housing now, but my initial supportive housing was like, really? I really don't need all this.
Yeah,
they're wasted on me.
Yeah, they're not all great. So that's a very good point. Thank you for sharing that.
Anyone else? Any?
What are the statistics though on the percentage of homeless that are mentally ill? Did you have that?
Yeah, I didn't look at my notes for that. It's pretty high. It's not as high as people think, but it is.
I know there's a high percent of veterans.
Yeah, there's a very high percent of veterans.
And then also, what is it, 2 or 3 foreclosed houses for every homeless person in the country?
24, I've heard.
24.
Wow.
Yep, 24 for every,
And that's not just vacant houses, that's foreclosed houses.
Yeah.
I heard it's vacant.
Is it vacant?
Yeah, 24 is vacant. I don't
Okay,
know.
maybe that's where I got the 2 or 3 number for foreclosed on.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, they're both significant numbers there.
I mean, there's definitely enough to meet the demand.
Then you've got the warehousing of the mentally ill in prison.
Yeah, that's bad.
And then county jails.
State hospitals, all of it, yeah.
And nursing homes. Yeah,
Well, they turn
nursing
the
homes.
jails and the prisons right into state hospitals.
Yeah, pretty much.
But, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to get sometimes even physical medical help that you need in a place like that,
no,
you know?
No, you're not. 22%. 22%. And
So there's 78% that are not mentally ill that are not.
well, or they might not be dying.
They don't count alcoholism and drug addiction in the
No,
mentally?
they don't put that in the same thing. That should be the same thing.
But there's also probably situations as well, where like somebody might not be diagnosed, but certain circumstances might sort of push them towards predisposition.
Yeah, it's hard to get these statistics on homeless population too, because by nature it's a transient population. So, and people who don't really, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, who don't really fit into mainstream society, who are not willing to be like, yeah, hey, I'm bipolar. You know, that's just one more thing to separate them.
Well, and I mean, on top of that, I mean, I'm a fairly stable human being, but I mean, if you took away my home and the place where I go at the end of the day, when I need to recruit some people and be by myself, I'd probably go crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just be like...
Yeah, where it's not mental illness, it's just responding appropriately to the situation sometimes.
Right. That's the thing too, because there is a difference between like clinical depression and situational depression.
Well, but my point is that after a while of that, I mean, it will develop into something. I mean, any kind of illness that you have for a while has the opportunity to become chronic and become more severe. You know, I imagine that, if I were to go out into a situation where I didn't have a home, I didn't have a place to go at the end of the day, I didn't have like a quiet, peaceful surrounding, after 6 months of that, I would probably start developing other things, and that would be diagnosis. I mean, hell, probably, what I've described is probably diagnosis.
No, it would change you. Things would change you for sure. Yeah.
Well, there's this wonderful diagnosis called adjustment disorder, which is basically saying that something has changed in your life and you're having a difficult time adjusting to it.
Wow.
That was one that was created.
So everybody's got it. That one.
Several times.
What were you gonna say?
Just wait around, you'll get it again.
Make comments about the the poor services, like you're in some kind of assisted living, and relate to those kind of comments. Our general culture, it's we seem to be, whether it's stuff like this or schools, prisons, even foreign policy, or general American culture, the people that run these things seem to be always very control freak about it.
Yeah.
Do it my way, you have to get out, instead of just focusing on helping people who need it. Also, it seems like just trying to, okay, if this person just needs this, then they'll be okay, or they just need a house, or get a job, or a vacation, or whatever, as opposed to being in some kind of general, community.
I bet you like 90% of homeless people have had a job before. I bet you easy.
But general culture is atomized anyway. Everyone lives in their own little place, they go to their own little job, they got their own little car, and instead of more cohesive cultures, you can imagine most of the world was like that.
You had a statistic about the number of homeless percentage.
Yeah, 19, that's another big hit.
That's hard to do. I'll just say I've done that before too. It's very difficult to find a job and keep a job with all the crap that comes along with having no work.
Exactly.
I've done that too.
Exactly. I think it's 19% of people who are homeless work, and one of 19. Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty high.
And more probably would do that if it was easier to do. It's like I said, it's difficult. You got to be showered. You got to be, dressed. You got to get yourself from A to B. You got to be,
You got to have a bank account or an address to have your.
Well, you got to have our phone number. They're going to want a phone number. They're going to.
Every job I've had in the past 3 years. Say that like it's a lot. It's been 2, but both jobs they had to do direct deposit. They would not send you your check. They would not give you your check. It had to be direct.
See, even I guess I could do that. I have a home and I just don't do any direct deposit right now.
You were talking about, you talked about before about the homeless people being comfortable. They don't want to be, they don't want to live in a house, or they don't want to be, and it just reminds me of years and years ago, I suddenly got this urge to learn everything I could about Charles Manson. I know that's weird.
I watch him on YouTube sometimes. He's funny.
But I am Bethany's mother, so. But, and he grew up in youth homes, in detention homes for youth, and the last time they released him from an institution, he told them that he said, I cannot exist out in the outside world. But they let him go anyway, and then look what happened.
He's not the only guy that ever told him that on their way out.
So he was very comfortable being institutionalized, just like you said, your homeless people are comfortable
comfortable living that guy that you always told us about living under the bridge.
Young people are going to adjust to the system or homeless or anything much faster, too. It'll only take a year or two, and you'll be a way different. It'll be like you don't even remember the lifetime that happened before that.
Right, and it depends on how long, like, you know, if it were, for example, if I owned a house and I was closed on, and I didn't have the support of my parents and friends, I would have a horrible time adjusting to being homeless, because I've never been homeless. I would hate it. I wouldn't be able to make it, but yeah.
Me and my wife were talking about it the other day, and she would have no idea what to do. She's the hardest working person I know. She's smart. She's all this and that. She can't even, it's hard for her to even put herself to try to think about what that would be like.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And most of us couldn't. Even those of us who think we're so open-minded and are so understanding.
I mean, even if you went and did it for a week, like for a trial, you could learn some things, but you would know at the end of the week everything was going to be okay.
Exactly.
You know?
Really wouldn't feel the threat.
No, yeah, it's not there, like the thing that you would have to adjust the biggest adjustment for a guy who's doing it for real or a lady who's doing it for real. Yeah.
One of the things that I did in college, which I actually, if anyone's interested, I would like to organize as like an awareness event for Occupy, specifically for the homelessness working group. There's something that they do across the country called Cardboard Nation. It's usually a student thing. And basically they reserve, like when I did it, it was at, on a community college campus, and basically everyone made their home out of a cardboard box and were homeless for the night. They fed us like a soup kitchen would feed you. And it's a really good experience, and people would like sponsor you, like, you know, you stay out there for 3 hours, I'll give you $1 per hour, blah, 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 blah. But it was almost too fun. You know, it's kind of like camping.
No, yeah.
It was kind of like a novelty. It's like, oh, look at me, I'm sleeping on the grass tonight, and it's like, oh, it's pouring down rain, but I can go camping with us. I love it now, though.
Well, I mean, so you could learn the tricks, and you could learn, you know, what you got to do, and the physical stuff that you have to go through, but you wouldn't be able to learn anything else.
Yeah, you knew. I know. I had a horrible migraine one of the nights I did it, and I went and slept in my car.
Yeah, well, and you always know you could tap out at any time. You could always go, yeah.
Well, and I think too, like, there's a whole nother, like, beyond not having a home, there's a whole nother sort of hustle that you kind of have and you have to work on, you know, like, okay, so if I don't have an address, where am I getting my mail? If I don't have a place to stay, where am I taking a shower? Where am I going to eat? You know, where am I going to, you know, use the internet or be able to school? Like, these kinds of things that are connected to housing, like, in ways that you don't even think about.
I think one of my brothers in this city is probably a
That way.
person. One of my brothers is homeless. I'm pretty sure he lives in the city.
Yeah.
But you know, getting back to the danger of what you were saying about people getting comfortable being homeless or that couple, you got to be careful because then the establishment will say, well, we don't need to provide services because that's what they know and that's what they want.
Right, and that's...
So why should we go out here and give them a house if they don't?
Well, see, there's funny stuff too. Like a lot of cities, I know that they're talking about it no more now, but months ago, coming up on Thanksgiving in Amarillo, they wanted to feed the homeless, and it's illegal. You know.
That is something.
And we wanted to put tents at Occupy San Antonio, and the councilman tells us, well, you can't put tents. If you put tents, the homeless are going to put tents.
So that might be a good segue.
You know?
You wanted to notice about time. That might be a good segue.
Yeah. So one of the things, I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things I believe we're actually doing in Austin, and I don't know if you guys heard about what happened in Houston. I think it was in direct response to Food Not Bombs, which is an organization that, someone correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not too familiar with it, but don't they grow fresh food and feed people who are, I don't think it's just homeless, people who are low income.
I know they feed people. I don't know if they grow it.
At least here, I think they dumpster dive a lot.
Yeah.
The ones I know in San Antonio that have been associated with it are probably pro-dumpster diving techniques.
Yeah. Well, and you know,
They get donations from restaurants.
Yeah, okay. I'm wanting to say that one of the organizations, maybe it's not Food Not Bombs, but someplace they were like growing their own food and trying to provide.
Yeah, I think Food Not Bombs is like Food Claims Food.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Thank you. Thank you guys. But anyways, they made a policy in Houston, which people believe is a direct response to Food Not Bombs, that you cannot share food.
Yeah, that just recently happened.
Yes, and their reasons are, and you know, on the outside, they sound like they're just like, you know, with everything that's gone on with Occupy. On the outside, if you're not inside the movement, you can see, oh, well, I understand why these ordinances are there.
Well, if you don't think about it.
Exactly, but basically what they're saying is that they have to, it's a health code thing. Like, well, we can't have people just getting
What if somebody gets sick? Hey, I can guarantee you that if a homeless person is taking food from someone, they are not going to sue you if they get sick. They're going to be happy that they have the food. They're going to be happy that someone provided the food.
You might get sick from starving.
Yeah, what's the counter question too? Well, what if somebody goes hungry?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, I think that's a little bit more of a priority.
Exactly. So that's something that has happened in Houston. I'm wanting to say maybe somewhere in Florida.
Florida, yep.
Everything always happens in Florida first. And yeah, Florida has like waged a war against the poor, I think.
A lot of places. I was talking to Occupy Indianapolis because they were trying to get people from Texas to come for the Occupy the Super Bowl. And when he was explaining to me what they were doing there, he said the city was running out the homeless people. Then at the same time, they were telling people, hey, come back after the Super Bowl and for free, everybody clean up the mess of the Super Bowl and we'll give you a hat or a T-shirt or something. And
Wow.
well, they're ejecting the homeless because they don't want everybody to see them when they come to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
What do you all think about using homeless for Wi-Fi?
I saw that. They're homeless people got a job walking around being a Wi-Fi spot. They're like a roving tower or something, and people.
You can't just plant the thing and let them do something more useful.
Carrying tethers.
Well, this way it's moving around.
I could see both sorts of aspects of that, like in the sense that, like.
They're paying them, right?
Okay, so you have all these hipsters wandering around with their gazillion devices. I mean, and I have my smartphone too, but so whatever. But, you know, you have all these hipsters wandering around with their gazillion devices, and they're going to bitch about how they can't get a signal, and then they're gonna, you know, this and that and the other thing.
This other gentleman's on
And,
his cell phone.
you know,
Just look through
and
here.
I think a lot of folks who come here, particularly folks that are a little more affluent,
Thank you. I'll take it
don't
back in a minute.
really want to be confronted with poverty, and so I think, at least on its face, is kind of an awesome way to do that. But it also smacks a whole lot of exploitation.
It is, and that's my problem with, because they're like walking billboards. I think Jimmy Morlog, who was our live stream guy, I guess he's still doing live streams? Yeah. I haven't been around a lot lately. He had posted several places online that, you know, homeless people are not walking billboards. And that, I think, is the problem that a lot of people have with it, is that, you know, if you really want to, and I would like to think that the intentions are pure.
It seems pretty degrading and exploitive.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the idealist in me.
No, I mean, I feel all those, but I think that ask the people who are doing it, do they feel like that they would rather did it or not?
And that's one thing that someone had mentioned, is that they were interested in seeing what people thought.
I go by a lady dressed like the Statue of Liberty about taxes today.
Oh, all the time. All the time.
Yeah.
We talked about this morning during our Azura did a thing on exploitation, and her question was, well, so if you go to a prostitute and she feels like her sex work is exploitative, a lot of times she probably will say no, because from her perspective it isn't. But from the outside, you may kind of see a different story, because you have the, you know, the outside view, and you're like, yeah, but you could be doing this, or you could be in this, whatever, but you're not. You're in the situation. So, I mean, I'm not necessarily weighing down on whether it is or it is not. The point they're trying to make is sometimes like if you're in a situation, it's hard to be like, hey, I'm being excluded right now. You know, when you're grateful that you have a roof over your head, or when you're grateful that you have a little bit of money for food, you may not realize that, hey, but if I did this, and if I thought this creatively, or if this other thing could be better, I could actually have more money. I
just think it's funny. There was a PCR on it. I don't know if you saw that article that came out yesterday about the homeless folks and Wi-Fi here. And this author of this article was making the case that, like, he's really innovative, and this is really, like, indicative of, like, tolerance for homeless people, blah, blah, blah. And why? I'm getting there. And, you know, so she's talking about, like, this is really indicative, like, this is what we did with Leslie, and, you know, and Austin versus Leslie, and Austin versus homeless people. And I'm like, what the fuck? No, because here you have Leslie, and, like, you know, Leslie falls and bucks his head, and he needs medical care, and they're running, you know, donation drives at book people. I don't see book people running donation drives for all the other homeless folks who bust their heads, you know, this kind of thing. I mean, so there's that, and then there's the, like, obviously this person is, you know, not from Austin or hasn't been here long enough to really look at homelessness issues, because, like, even the friggin' sit-lie ordinance, let's start on that crap.
Yeah, let's start on that crap, because that was something that I wanted to talk about. That is a great segue. I know, right?
Start on that crap.
Yeah, right? We should all go have this teaching on the sidewalk. So So, for those of you that aren't aware, and I'm sure most of you are, it's basically, as in a lot of other cities across the United States, it's basically illegal to be homeless in Austin. You can be arrested for sitting on the sidewalk for...
Vagrancy.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have an ID.
Right.
Unless you're Leslie.
Yeah, Leslie can do it because
He's famous.
And Jennifer Gale could do it to an extent.
But, and you or I could do it. I guarantee you, if we were having this meeting sitting on the sidewalk, and maybe I'm getting
cappuccino.
Right, and playing on our...
No, they won't run people off the... No.
You need to look homeless.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen people on 6th Street almost passed out drunk on the sidewalk. The cops just walked by them. Sorry, I'm going to come down from my soapbox.
Actually, you need to look like homeless, or if you look like occupied.
Yeah.
Occupy's worse to them, I think.
Yeah, that's a very good... Well, we all look homeless anyway.
We're a bandana, they'll call three,
Exactly.
three cops per guy,
Yeah. So yeah, there's that. And actually, I read something really interesting about that. I don't know how familiar you guys are with House the Homeless, but those people in Austin know who Richard Troxel is, who is a very strong advocate for the homeless here. He has been working on getting the camping ban lifted for the past 15 years.
Wow.
Hopefully it'll happen someday soon. So I was reading an article when I believe it was when, and I wasn't in Austin when all this started, but when they started talking about these laws about sitting on the sidewalk, and when they changed it to where it was exclusive if you are physically disabled, not mentally.